All right. So when Dane met Bukele. So End Wokeness put out breaking: Judge Paula Zinnes orders Trump to return a suspected MS-13 member from an El Salvadoran jail. Bukele thought this was hilarious, tweeted this out in response to it. It's hilarious. The idea that this innocent family man, apprentice sheet metal worker, has been put into this hellish violation of human rights prison that he built. Hilarious. Elon thought it was really funny too. Wow. This is the guy who gets teary-eyed about his stock price going down on Fox, but he thinks this is hilarious because it's happening to peasants. It's happening to peasants. It's not happening to people like them. It doesn't matter. So Bukele, in the Oval Office session they just had with the cabinet, with the reporters, was asked if he would consider releasing Abrego Garcia.
Can President Bukele weigh in on this? Do you plan to return him?
Well, I'm supposed to not suggesting that I smuggle terrorists into the United States, right?
It's always
how can I return him to the United States? Like, I smuggle him into the United States, or what do I do? Of course, I'm not going to do it. It's like...
Okay, so now, first of all, he's calling him a terrorist, which there's absolutely no basis for this. There was a very flimsy accusation of him being a member of a gang that existed in a state that he had never visited, that he was a member of MS-13 in Western New York, where I am right now, coincidentally. He had never been to the state.
Speaking of which, let's bring in our guest. No.
Yeah. I never met this guy. Yeah. I don't know what he thought. I never saw him hanging around the clubhouse. So he's lying about that. And this is after Pam Bondi said off the top of her head, she probably got a good talking to afterwards for saying this, that her interpretation of they would facilitate him returning was they'd provide a plane. So what is he talking about that he'd smuggle them in? She acknowledged there's a court order that they have to facilitate his return and says they would provide a plane. So even on its own deranged terms, what he's saying is absolute bullshit.
I mean, the question is preposterous. How can I smuggle a terrorist into the United States? I don't have the power to return him to the United States.
So you can release him inside El Salvador.
Yeah, but I'm not releasing. I mean, we're not very fond of releasing terrorists into our country. I mean, we just turned the murder capital of the world into the safest country of the Western Hemisphere, and you want us to go back into the releasing criminals so we can go back to being the murder capital of the world? No, that's not going to happen.
They'd love to have a criminal, released into
I mean, there's a fascination.
They would love it.
They're
sick. These are sick people.
These are sick people.
Yeah,
these are sick people. The guys who think it is hilarious that an innocent man has been put in this hellish prison, they're not the sick people. It's the people asking about it who are the sick people. And by the way, Bukele has already sent back 9 people to the United States that the Trump administration insists are gang members. He sent back people who were from other Central American countries because he was afraid it would cause static between him and those countries. So he sent them back. I guess he smuggled these terrorists somehow back into the United States.
Right.
So now Trump was actually asked straight out if he wants to do this with American citizens or would consider it.
Just a follow-up question, a clarification. You mentioned that you're open to deporting individuals that aren't foreign aliens but are criminals to El Salvador. Does that include potentially U.S. citizens, fully naturalized Americans?
If they're criminals and if they hit people with baseball bats over their head that happen to be 90 years old, and if they rape 87-year-old women in Coney Island, Brooklyn, that includes them. What do you think? There's special category
like the thought to have.
They're as bad as anybody that comes in. We have bad ones too, and I'm all for it because we can do things with the president for less money and have great security. And we have a huge prison population. We have a huge number of prisons, and then we have the private prisons, and some are operated well, I guess, and some aren't. But he does a great job with that. We have others that we're negotiating with too. But no, if it's a homegrown criminal, I have no problem. Now, we're studying the laws right now. Pam is studying. If we can do that, that's good. And I'm talking about violent people. I'm talking about really bad people. Really bad people. Every bit as bad as the ones coming in.
Okay, so yes, we want to illegally remove Americans to foreign countries. And he says he's talking to other people who want to get in on this deal too. So you have a president who wants to essentially outsource penal colonies to other countries in order to get around the legal protections that the Constitution affords to the accused. But don't worry. It's only going to be the people raping grandmothers in Coney Island or whatever the fuck keeps him up at night. Whatever fantasy he has of the criminal alien running around Coney Island. You must have seen The Warriors right before this interview. But about 90% of migrants sent to Salvador lacked a U.S. criminal record. So you remember how they said they were only deporting violent criminals? You remember how when they came in, Dr. Phil's running around with ICE, and they said they're getting rid of the worst of the worst? 90% of migrants sent to Salvador. So he's saying it's only going to be people who are attacking the old ladies in Coney Island. But we saw how that worked out, whether it was only going to be the violent criminals who were going to be deported from the United States. Not only are 90% of them lacking a U.S. criminal record, 75% lack a criminal record anywhere. And they were not sent back to their home countries or a neutral third-party country. These people were sent to hell. Does this seem like an administration that once they think they can get away with that is not going to deport people to prison for dissent, accusing them of being aligned with terrorists? Patriot Act opens a lane for that a mile wide, as many people have been warning for 25 years since it passed, that the Patriot Act would only require an administration with the will to exploit its provisions for detaining terrorists for American citizens to be detained without evidence or trial. That's exactly where this is going. That is exactly where this is going. And in order to avoid having to make their case in court, they're going to deport these people. And they're going to do the same exact thing they're doing in Garcia's case. You can't interfere with the foreign policy of the United States.
Right. Yeah. It's amazing. Like how many of these facilities does he want built? He says, we're negotiating with some other people too. How many of these jails do you want?
Right.
How many ultra-violent criminals do you think there are in this country? This is why, look, they obviously don't intend for this to apply to only violent criminals. It's obvious where they're coming from. It's obvious what their intentions are. But to the people, to the average moron who supports this, thinking, well, yeah, we got to get all the criminals. This is why I say, in order to support this, you have to be either just an extremely broken and hateful person, which a lot of them are, or a complete paranoid lunatic who thinks there are millions of people in America who are going to come at you and beat you up and try and kill you. Or like it's such a paranoid view of the world that you have to be like sincerely on board with this. It's really crazy. And this is like 90% of their efforts so far, it seems, have been throwing people out of the country and or putting them in jail.
Right.
That's been like almost the entire program for the first 3 months.
Well,
by the way, what's the price of things? How's inflation going? Anything that those groceries come down?
And tariffs.
Yeah.
And tariffs.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, these people just get fed this information from media that they consume, very much like the libs. They get fed this information. They have no experience of it. I always talk about this YouTube channel that specializes in ginning up paranoia about New York. This guy, Cash Jordan, just straight up lies. I saw a headline the other day. Trump shuts down New York subways because they're too dangerous It never happened. It never happened. But shit, man, if that's your media diet, yeah.
Oh,
yeah, you think there's all these gangs running around just raiding stores, it's Thunderdome, it's crazy. So here's a good example of the worst of the worst. This is Trump's idea of the worst of the worst. That's what was going to happen with the immigrants, right? You got Garcia, and then you got a hairdresser, a makeup artist got deported. Does this look like the worst of the worst to you? It doesn't look like the worst of the worst to me. So now they had a little aside that was caught on camera, and it doesn't look like they were trying to hide it, where they were openly discussing how they're going to go after the homegrowns next, as Trump calls them.
Demanded the people wanted to change everything, and they wanted to. They love you. They love what you do. I'm not feel supportive. I want them to do. Homegrown criminals next. Yeah.
Homegrown criminals next.
Next. The homegrown. You got to build about 5 more places. Yeah, that's fair. All right. It's not big enough. No, yeah,
so
come
funny.
on. So this is a much different office than you remember.
Why do you think they're not the morons who are watching YouTube channels that are telling you that the subways don't run anymore? So why do you think they are so concerned with having a way to detain the number of people that he seems to be contemplating? Because they know they're going to fuck you. They know when their financial plans really come to fruition and people find out that they're not going to be building Ford plants in Sheboygan anytime soon, that these decimated factory towns are not coming back. That was never the plan, that they're just building a lifeboat for themselves and their criminal friends, and they're going to let everybody else drown, especially as AI becomes much more capable of doing a lot of jobs, even white-collar jobs. They got to have a place to send people. They're going to be out in the streets. They're going to be protesting. They're going to be really angry. They're building a police state for the next phase of their plan, which is the phase where everybody dies. Where I've been saying this over and over again. They are trying to kill you. They want you dead. With AI, they don't need a large labor force like they used to. There are too many people around. They're messing with the social safety net under very false pretenses. They're messing with Social Security, introducing new fraud measures that are just a way of making it harder to get. That's the whole point of those measures. They want less people. That is what all of this is aimed at. And there's going to be a moment where people realize that and rebel. They need some place to send them. So speaking of broken people, I voted for exactly this. That's in response to that video, right, where they're talking about the homegrowns. I cannot wait. I cannot wait. A lot of peasant minds out there. So here's a commentator with a blog, Jim Stewartson, who's done some reporting on Bukele. Nayib Bukele wants to be a black site penal colony for Trump, which is why Eric Prince went to visit CECOT in August, and why Bukele is playing games in the White House about innocent people being tortured in his prison. So here's Eric Prince's visit to Bukele.
Eric Prince, real pleasure.
Nice meeting you.
I saw you speak at CPAC. Yeah. It's fantastic.
Thank you.
I'm proud of who my enemies are. I've made a few around.
Yeah, that's good. That's good, right?
I visited CECOT yesterday.
Yes, I saw
and I was very impressed. And I will proudly go back and tell the good news story that it is possible to turn around chaos. I'm not surprised, but also disgusted that the State Department still lists El Salvador as a super dangerous war zone country.
Well,
hopefully they will change that, because it's unsustainable really to keep it at level 3. We should be in level 1. It's not going to happen, but at least level 2 it will be more sustainable.
Did better than that. They did level 1 for him. Nayib Bukele is the model for the North American Reich. He purged El Salvador's government and Supreme Court, got himself unconstitutionally reelected, and arrests anyone he wants. Due process is gone, but the trains run on time. Yeah, there was very little crime in most fascist countries, right? Isn't there a way to do something about crime without turning your country into a fascist hellhole? Not according to folks like this. So, speaking to that level one, 4 days ago, the State Department under Marco Rubio, who went to visit Bukele in 2023 as a senator, changed the designation of El Salvador to a one normal, which is the safest. But the drop in crime that Bukele has been praised for comes at the cost of suspending constitutional rights, including the normal protections of criminal procedure, like the right to a speedy trial. El Salvador was also the first nation to recognize Bitcoin as legal tender in 2021. Note this confluence of the PayPal mafia and Eric Prince is not a coincidence. Prince, Thiel, and Musk have known each other for at least 25 years, and El Salvador is the model they want to implement in the United States of America. Exactly. Look at what they're doing. They are trying to use their power in the executive to subvert the constitution of the country, and they are trying to lock people up in indefinite detention with no due process, just like Bukele.
Right.
Bukele's their guy, man. He's their guy. So we mentioned this in the previous segment, but to elaborate on it a little bit, Jim McGovern, representative, has asked for an explanation because we don't actually know what Rubio agreed to with Bukele. We don't have it in writing. Read my new urgent demand for answers. The American people deserve to know what Marco Rubio and Bukele agreed to. So this is some of what's in the letter. Since March 2022, El Salvador's government has ruled under a state of exception, which suspended basic rights and due process, resulting in mass arbitrary detention, enforced disappearance, harsh and life-threatening prison conditions, and human rights violations. In 2024, Nayib Bukele followed in the footsteps of Daniel Ortega in Nicaragua and ran for a consecutive re-election despite a constitutional ban. Isn't Trump talking about how he wants to run for a third term?
Right.
There have also been reports of American citizens or their family members who have been arbitrarily detained under the state of exception. We are disappointed that you called for more Americans to be sent to horrific prison conditions in El Salvador, where at least 350 persons have died under custody, instead of urging the government of El Salvador to free Americans and their family members wrongly detained. Moreover, we are concerned that the Trump administration has failed to fully investigate alleged ties between President Bukele and MS-13 gangs. According to investigations by the Treasury Department, part of the way that Bukele brought crime down wasn't locking up MS-13 members, but actually bribing them, paying them off to bring down the crime rate so they could get this nice L1 rating that they've been seeking. Once again, Timothy Snyder here. The entire practice of the Holocaust of the Jews involved zones of statelessness. It is easier to move people away from law than it is to remove law from people. Almost all of the killing took place in artificially created stateless zones. This is why most of the camps, if you notice, were not in Germany. Most of the camps were in other countries. If we accept the idea that moving a person from one place to another undoes rights and disempowers the judiciary, we are endorsing the basic Nazism practice that enabled the killing of millions. Now, you might think that's hyperbolic. Well, so did the Germans. They thought there a lot of editorials they wrote saying, well, yes, the Nazis, they're very uncouth, but people who are saying that they're a real threat to the republic, this is hyperbolic. Listen, one of the things, we'll see this in the next segment because Jon Stewart is forced to concede this, and I think we are among the commentators who are forced to concede this. The craziest shit the liberals said about this crew turned out to be true. I'm just calling balls and strikes. I got to be honest. I don't like those people anymore now than I did before. They were right. We were wrong, man. We were wrong. Based on the first term, I always felt that the cries of fascism and that they're going to dismantle the Constitution were hyperbole. Not this time. Not in the second term. Everything they said was going to be the danger of his second term. It's turning out to be true.
Well, I would say it's actually worse, and I would say it's actually quite a bit worse. And that's where I didn't expect it to. I knew this was essentially going to be what they were going to do. I knew they were going to be, rousting protesters, harassing people. Like, I didn't downplay any of that. But that's why I didn't
why
support
would you
it.
think of this?
Well,
this
is what I mean.
They would cut a deal with some authoritarian dictator to deport our prisoners. Like, why would you think of that?
Right. It's not that, like, I'm not surprised by the policies. I'm honestly not. That's why I said you shouldn't vote for him in the last election. That's probably a big reason why we couldn't not ever, contemplate supporting Donald Trump. But they're coming up with clever ways to do things that I didn't think they would.
Right. It's the execution, not the intent.
Right. It's the execution, not the intent. I knew what the intent was, but how can you predict? Oh, yeah, they're going to find some strong man, just like I said, just comically corrupt leader. I mean, this guy, of course, this guy is negotiating with fucking gangsters. Take one look. He looks like a gangster. He presents as a gangster, right? With the very trim beard and the suit and the slick back hair. He's a gangster. The fucking guy reads gangster. The way he acts, the way he conducts himself, the way he sits back in the chair, his whole body language. Obviously, he's wheeling and dealing with these gangs to keep the murder rate low this season so that my poll numbers go up. Like, it's the most obvious fucking thing in the world. And did I think that they would find him and come up with some scheme to pay him off to house our prisoners? No, I didn't think so. I knew they would deport student protesters because he said he would. I knew they would be very cruel to immigrants because he said he'd be very cruel to immigrants. None of that surprised me, which is why I didn't support him. But I didn't think they would find these kinds of ways to go about it, such that.
This is what I'm saying. Like, yes, these intentions were clear. How quickly they just pushed it to constitutional crisis and pushed it to the courts have no authority over the executive, and we're going to find ways to assert king-like executive authorities, and if the courts try to stop us, we're just going to tell them to go fuck themselves. That you got here in 2 months?
Yeah, and the speed at which they were able to come up with these workarounds.
It's all that stuff they telegraphed. You knew they were going to crack down on student protesters. You knew they were going to do deportations. The manner that they are going about it is so extra constitutional, and they got there so quickly. I think that is a surprise.
Yes, that was a surprise to me. The execution, not the policy itself.
Not the intent.
That's a good way of putting it. Yeah.
Please clap.